I'm Justin Cappos. I'm a professor in the Computer Science and Engineering department at New York University. And I work on a lot of software supply chain security, primarily, and have built and deployed systems that are very widely used across industry, especially open source, but in cloud computing, automobiles, things like that. And one of the things that I built is a system called TUF, which was one of the first systems to widely deploy like post-quantum safe cryptography.
Which is the stage where we are right now? Do we need more work around post-quantum technology?
Well, I think there are some promising signs. I think the fact that NIST has started to do standardization of algorithms, and those algorithms are actually feasible to deploy in real systems and are give what seem to be meaningful guarantees and stuff, is really, really promising. Because before this, people who cared didn't have a way to know that they were doing a good thing for sure. They just sort of had to take the word of these researchers that were building these algorithms that maybe they were good. But on the other hand, not everyone is using post-quantum safe cryptography right now. And so a way to think about it is that when sufficiently strong computers come around and can break a lot of this cryptography, then any saved data that is being generated on those systems today, any saved messages that went over networks or saved other things like that, could potentially be broken. So it can be a problem, but and the sooner we fix this, the sooner we move to algorithms that are safe and things like this that are effective against this, that will effectively blind the future people who build these quantum systems from being able to go and read the messages that we're generating today.
When do you expect this is going to happen? Like the first computing or the first thing that is able to break cryptography?
The first thing that's able to break cryptography, I would say, if you had, let's say I had $3 and I had to bet, I'd put $1 on it's going to happen in about 5 years. I'd put $1 on it's going to happen in about 10 to 15 years. And I'd put $1 on I'm going to be dead before it happens.
So we don't know.
So I have no idea.
Really? Okay.
Really.
Okay. At the same time, you might think that is happening in 5 years.
It's good to be safe.
It's good to be
If it could happen in 5 years from now, and I can make a little tweak to software that I am building or distributing or things like that and make it safe, why not?
Sure.
It's the same, like we have actually a very similar situation with a lot of our cryptographic algorithms. So if you use things like Git and GitHub and other version control systems, they use an old hashing algorithm called SHA-1. And SHA-1 is known to be weak to certain types of attacks. And it just so happens that very luckily it's not weak to the types of attacks that would make it a really big problem for Git and GitHub and stuff like this, but it's weak to other attacks that are concerning, and it's only going to get weaker over time. So the good advice is if you're building a new system today, you don't use SHA-1. You use SHA-256, you use SHA-3, you use other algorithms that are much more mature and have been tested much better, and you use them. And so we just need to start to move things over to newer, safer algorithms.
The first thing that quantum will break will be RSA. And that technology was built on this assumption that this math equation cannot be solved that easily.
Yes.
Do you think maybe it was a too easy assumption we had, because we probably had this assumption before we knew the possibility of quantum mechanics? Well, we knew about quantum mechanics, but we didn't know about quantum math,
yes.
Probably. So I don't want to say that was naive, but do you have an opinion about it?
I don't think it was naive at all. What happened at the time is actually, for a very long time, a problem many of the most brilliant mathematicians across time have tried to solve is efficiently factoring a number that is the composite of two large primes. This is just known to be one that, it's a problem that like Newton and Gauss and all of these other like just brilliant mathematicians could not find efficient ways to do. And so for them to base cryptography on this was, I think, in fact, brilliant, to realize that there's this really hard math problem. Can we use this really hard math problem to write secrets in a good way? And then afterwards, other people realized, you know what, there's other really hard math problems. There's this thing called the discrete log problem. That's kind of hard too. We have these other things we can use. We can do this, we can do that, and we can have, you know, so it's not just all factoring numbers. And so by doing this, we have quite a toolkit of different techniques that people thought of. And I think this was considered well before, this is a problem, once again, that way predates any understanding of quantum being a thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was unwise for mathematicians in the, computer science / mathematicians in the 1970s to go and say, oh, hey, this is an effective tool for us to use to hide information.
It kept us safe for so long, after all, actually, and we built a lot of the internet infrastructure, software, hardware, and everything on top of it.
Yes.
So without it, we wouldn't even have the internet, along with everything else we see around in these days.
It would look very different. Now, one thing that's worth pointing out is actually that the inventors of RSA were not actually the first ones to discover it.
Right.
This was privately discovered by researchers for, is this the NSA or the Bletchley Park one? I forget.
The
one
British
is one.
Secret Service Agency.
Okay. So there was two things discovered around that time. One is a way of doing a key exchange securely that is also very famous. And then there's this, and one was discovered privately by the NSA, and the other was discovered privately in Bletchley Park in the UK. And then it was later declassified. And so, these academics and others who get all the fame for this, like, good for them, they discovered it themselves. But this was actually known to intelligence agencies ahead of time.
Considering now, the situation we are now, maybe it is, especially today, is a little bit naive that math assumption or knowledge can still hold everything that we built on top of it.
If I have an idea and it spawns generations and generations of the top minds across mathematics and computer science to try to break it, and after 50 years have gone by, people start to be concerned it might be breakable if a new physics invention comes along and uses a particular, marrying of those fields that requires billions of dollars of research to then break my idea, then I would be a very happy scientist. I would feel that I've built something that's lasted quite a while and things. So I don't think we can fault, Ron Rivest or anyone else for this. And I think that RSA took us a very far way. A lot of the other algorithms that came along and had these observations and were built and things like that were also really awesome, really impacted the world in a very positive way.
I am not saying the RSA was bad and it was naive. No, I think maybe I am going to this other question that is, well, now, let's say you are betting this $1 on the next 5 years, and that's the right bet. Don't you think is a little bit, it's a little bit scary.
I wouldn't use it today.
Should we do it? What should, I mean, I think also the new post-quantum algorithm, yes, something has been built, but in 5 years, who is going to use it? Very few people.
Well, I hope that's not true. I hope, if I were just an optimistic academic, I would say the world is going to see the writing on the wall and people will start to use this. Being a little more cynical and having more experience, what I've seen is that once people start to use it and prove it can be used, then regulators are going to step in and they're going to start requiring it in certain important domains. It's going to start to be required in medical devices and automobiles and airplanes and government, all the stuff the military and the rest of the government buys. And when that starts to happen, it's going to start to end up everywhere, because people are not going to want to maintain separate software stacks. They're going to say, well, if this is best practice here, why don't I use it for my payment infrastructure? Why don't I use it for this? And then you'll see changes to those standards. And then pretty soon it'll be this thing where it's sort of known, the default is you should be doing it this way. It'll take some time, but I am optimistic that, especially when things start to feel more real, feel more practical, there starts to be actual concerns, that people will then go in and start to make bigger strides.
What would be the agency that would do that, data upgrade, software upgrade? Agency, if you want, maybe you're more familiar with the United States, what at the international level? I mean, this kind of like advocacy, public policy that would be required to move forward.
A beautiful thing about the internet is that you can have a lot of impact if you're a big player, no matter where you are. So the United States and some of the regulations and things that they've done trickle over to other areas. You look at Europe with GDPR. That trickles very much over into the US and other countries. And so when organizations have to follow certain standards, they often will follow them and standardize everything across them, instead of saying, well, I'm going to have a separate system that only works for the regulations that apply to the European market of automobiles. They don't want to do that. They'd rather just apply that more uniformly. So once again, once this gets proven out, it will start to pick up momentum, and will very quickly start to be most places, is my prediction.
Okay, let's stay positive.
Yeah.
But let's say that eventually there is also this case scenario where the post-quantum network, the post-cryptography or the post-quantum cryptography algorithm or network is going to be owned by a company. Let's put it that way. Or only one government wants to use it, because some other governments in the world, they might say, oh, great, encryption is broken.
We want to spy. Yeah.
We want to take advantage of that. In that case...
We have it today. That's what happens in countries like Kazakhstan today. This is not a new thing. And what happens, though, is that companies or countries also want their citizens to be able to engage in commerce. They want them to be able to be citizens of the world to the extent that they can. And they also don't want other countries to spy on their citizens necessarily, or to spy on their communications. So there will always be apps and things like that that are available that let people go and function and do this. And the more this gets built into things like GitHub, right, where this is just a common workplace that most of the software development in the world that's done, or much of it is done on things like GitHub. And so because of this, when things like that are built in, it's really hard for countries and organizations to stop it.
Say that eventually someone figured it out, or they already built a computer, maybe in China or maybe Google.
Yep.
So in that case, they probably don't want to make it public because they have like the superpower at the moment, and they don't want to make people know that they have it.
I don't think that's true for Google.
No, I am just like
I don't think that would be true for a company. I can believe that for a government, but a company, I have a really hard time seeing why that would be the case. Because like a government would use it, depending on the government, they might use it for to break into systems, to do industrial espionage, to do, to do things like spying and other stuff like that. That's very believable. But Google being able to spy on whom and how do they get access to that data and why and what do they do and how do they defend that to their board, I think that's a lot harder. So I think a lot of these companies who are pursuing this because they either think it will be good for governments. It'll help them optimize certain types of problems, although who knows how well that will actually pan out in practice. I'm very not worried about a company secretly having this unless they're a military contractor that's working with the government.
Well, let's put that in the idea, in the case scenario that a government figured out. What would be, and they are keeping this secret, or they are want to keep it secret for a little longer, what they would use it for? Just put in.
Well, let's just say that you had people in your government that were communicating using apps across the internet, and you wanted to read their messages. That would be a pretty easy way to do that.
But beyond the chats on our phones, what would they do?
I mean, you can wreak all kinds of havoc. It depends. Like it's really up to what you could potentially use it to push out malicious software updates. That's one really, 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 really bad case. And if you do that to systems that aren't protected using post-quantum crypto, then you could replace the software on most internet-connected devices. Whenever they go for an update, you could give them whatever you want. Put in a backdoor. You could, if you imagine something like a car, you could have them, override all of the software. Your car is mostly has tons and tons of software, and they're way more than was used to go to the moon and back. And you can do things like override the brakes, cause the acceleration to be maximum, lock them in the car.
The power grid or the airport's transportation
100%.
system.
You could cause absolute chaos everywhere. You could spy on anything.
But more than spying is also breaking things, right? Because
you
once you can take down a server, take down routers. If you can just explain, articulate a little bit, because I am saying it.
Sure.
You're saying that more the infrastructure collapse, because it's not just about spying on the chats, email, but it was good about the update of software. But if you can talk a little bit about the infrastructure, the hardware part, it would be interesting.
Yeah, so you can push updates to all sorts of different hardware. You could damage the power grid. You could cause all kinds of problems with aircraft and things like this. It's really difficult to think of things that are unlikely to be able to be affected that have computers in them. But the good news is that a lot of these more mission critical types of systems are already starting to look at post-quantum safe cryptography. And once they get that in place, then they're no longer vulnerable. So that's why I think one of the early movers in this field is going to be all this critical infrastructure. It's going to be these types of organizations that it's really going to matter for.
I have a question following up.
Sure.
It's a little bit technical, but most of the routers and switches in these days have chips inside the hardware. And they're all made for the current cryptography system. Do you think that if there is a cryptography attack with quantum, which is after all will be just not a computing thing, but maybe an algorithm that's able to break that encryption, do you think every switch and routers could be vulnerable to that?
So I think that you do have specialized hardware that makes certain types of cryptographic operations faster. However, in practice, you can still do whatever algorithms you want. They just won't be accelerated by that hardware. They won't be faster. So there's nothing stopping you from doing an algorithm that isn't in your hardware. You just do it more slowly.
Okay, well, the following up question would be, what about the data centers? Those centers, they do work with cryptography on a software level, definitely. And if you take down a data server, then you have a blackout of quite a few websites, and that blackout can be a snowball, right?
It's if they don't use, just like anything else, if a data center doesn't use post-quantum safe cryptography, then they can be taken down in a situation where you have a quantum computer. But on the other hand, if they do, and they implement this the correct places and look at this, then they will not be affected.
It's always about when. I mean, what is the time windows between the upgrade of the software, the hardware, and when these algorithm or this technology is available? Because it could be even 1 year, but 1 year of a blackout of the internet in this time means quite like the end of the world.
Yes.
So it really depends how fast this upgrade will happen.
My guess is what will happen is once we get really close, once it seems imminent that this is going to happen, that people will get pushed more and more aggressively to upgrade things. Just like when Y2K was coming, there was a very aggressive push the year or year and a half before then to fix and test and do all sorts of things. And so when it finally did happen, almost nothing really occurred. Here, it may be harder to tell what happens because it's not like it goes from working one day to not working another. It goes from basically not vulnerable one day to being vulnerable to someone with a quantum computer and with the time and effort to try to break that specific thing. So what will happen is that then there will be a limited number of systems that the NSA or an aspect of the Russian government or the Chinese government or so on will be able to get into, but they'll still have to kind of target in those areas. It won't just be that you and me and everybody are all of a sudden going to be able to break into anything unless we all get quantum computers at the same time.
Yeah. Well, there is one thing, though, that is the blockchain and Bitcoin, that if someone is able to break even one signature, a big one, let's say, Satoshi Sakamoto, for instance, that's going to change a lot of things, at least in that world of the blockchain. They will really react to that. Probably also the financial market will be affected by that. What do you think? Because the blockchain and Bitcoin...
I'm a little more skeptical. My guess would be is that if there was any thought that there might be tampering there, they would probably lock anything using outdated cryptography. They would effectively give people a transition period and tell them you have to move your assets out, and we're not going to respect like asset transfers, because then it's a free-for-all for everybody. It's a key that everybody has, and that's sort of a lot less interesting. Because I mean, the only other option is that people will take that and they'll just transfer it to some account that is using post-quantum safe crypto. And then, on that, then whoever did that first owns that money now and can do whatever with it. But I don't know that that's such a... I mean, it will matter it will affect the price of Bitcoin a bit, and whether they decide as a community we are going to wall off this fairly substantial part of our market cap to protect it from just anybody taking these. My guess is they probably will do that, rather than just say whoever developed your quantum computer first, you just get to have all of this money. Where they would go and they would say, listen, we're not going to let Wild West happen with this part of our currency. And I don't know the number, but I think it's a pretty substantial amount. So it is enough where I think the people running the network will not want all of a sudden some amount of tokens to be up for grabs for anybody who has a quantum computer and wants to grab them. So my suspicion is what will happen is there will be a fork at that time, just like we had Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin Classic and all this other stuff that's happened, and Ethereum's gone through, forks and divergences and stuff. You can imagine there's a well, and a bunch of people have thrown money in the well over time. And it turns out there's an awful lot of money there. And then all of a sudden, quantum cryptography, breaking that is like someone all of a sudden has the idea, what if we had a rope and a bucket? And now they can go and scoop all of those coins off the bottom. And my guess is that what's going to happen is that the community is going to say, this isn't going to happen. We're going to declare everything at the bottom of the well, rather than it being up for grabs with anybody with this quantum bucket to grab. We're just going to say, nope, that money's now off limits. This is a wishing well.
I see if they can, because they don't know the key of
that. They can. They can absolutely do it, because what you can do is you can just have a new, Like once you have a post-quantum crypto algorithm that is a supported key type inside of Bitcoin, you just say everyone has to now use one of these, and you have to do it in the next 5 years, 10 years, whenever.
Yeah.
At some point, if you don't transfer it, we're going to say your money is in the bottom of the well.
Yeah,
and people will do that.
If someone comes first.
If they come first, then the community has a decision to make like that. But I don't think, because I don't think a government's going to do that. I don't think like the U.S. government or the Chinese government, you know, if a government does it, they have to do it slow. If someone really wanted to steal it, they'd have to do it slowly over time, right? And if they're doing it slowly over time, and they're you know, it's not noticeable that they're doing it, then there also isn't really an impact on at least the cryptocurrency price as a whole. They're sort of, you know, skimming pennies out of the well. If they do it all at once, which is I think the big fear, that's when I think the community would step in and say, this is all, you know, this cannot stand. And if they've been smart enough to put post-quantum crypto in place for everybody else and tell people they have to migrate to it, then anybody who hasn't done it is going to be in trouble. But that's, you know, there's a ton of risk in you know, in cryptocurrencies. So yeah, you should be using post-quantum crypto if you do that anyway.
But what about the banking system? Too, that's a risk as well, right?
They're going to upgrade. They're going to be early upgrades, just like automotive, just like medical devices, just like power grid.
The thing, though, is that you are talking like the upgrade is already available, but it's not. And also it's not tested. Even if it's available, we don't know for how long it's going to work. So it's very positive.
But this always happens. I think the thing that a lot of people miss is this is not a new phenomena, right? Like DES is broken. Like MD5 is broken. Like, you know, all of these like old cryptography things that were around a long time ago. Actually, RSA is, I don't know this is literally true, but it seems like it could be one of the longest lived of the algorithms developed around that time that were put out around then. Everything else I can think of that came out around then is like dead, has been broken completely, right? And so, in the fact that we have to upgrade software to use new algorithms over time is something we have been doing as a community. It's not something that everyone in the community is good at. It's not something that is always done right, but it's something that happens. And it, as I said before, it really does happen with a mix of like regulation. And once something becomes a norm and it starts getting taught as like, this is the right way to do it, and it's been used in other fields, it just percolates out. It spreads out everywhere. It starts to be, instead of like, you know, have you heard of this crazy thing? It's, why aren't you doing this thing that all these other groups are doing? And that takes time. It's like, you know, you're watching, you know, you're watching a glacier, or you're watching, you know, you're looking for some sign. But we've seen so many of these happen over time. Like SHA-1 is not being like used in new software by many people. Like people are tending to be pretty good about following best practice. Like PCI has been a big success. NIST has had success after success after success. You see a lot of the regulation in automotive and medical devices have been extremely successful at improving security. I'm optimistic this is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, actually, we do have to protect cryptography, of course, otherwise it's really the end of the world.
Cryptography is absolutely important. If nothing happens, if we all just fall asleep at the wheel and someone goes and builds a quantum computer, or even worse, like if quantum computer, all of a sudden someone realizes, oh, you can just do X and now anybody can have a quantum computer, and now you've got 1 million people in the world with it, that could be absolute pandemonium today. But I don't think we live in that world. I think the world that we live in is one where we're going to see a few governments that perhaps go and get this capability. And when they do, they're going to also want to make sure that their communications are being protected. We're going to see then a very wide push. We've already seen a push for people to adopt and use post-quantum safe cryptography. When that happens, I think we're just going to see this take off and spread. And I have a feeling, and I can certainly be wrong, time will tell, But I have a feeling that when we look back 10-ish years from now, this may feel a little bit like the Y2K scare, where we sit and say, what were we so worried about? At least, as an optimist, I'm saying that we have the ability to make that be our future. I just hope that we're wise enough to choose that path.